What's up, guys? Today I have a host from NBC Sports Chicago, a well-respected NFL draft analyst, and a guy I've long wanted to have on the show myself. I'm honored to be joined by Glynn Morgan. Glynn, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the Bears fans out there where they can find you at as well.
Hey, thanks, Swifty. Appreciate it, man. Really, the honor's mine. Anytime anyone asks me to be on the show, I'm humbled, to be quite honest with you. Anybody wants to listen to me, because a lot of times my wife and kids don't. So anybody else who wants to listen to me, I'm down with it. So thank you for having me on the show. As far as where to find me, from time to time, you can find me on NBC Sports Chicago's. However you able to receive that via cable or social media, however do it, YouTube. But on shows like Football Night in Chicago, the Bears Under Center podcast. Also, too, weekly, I put out, well, it's going to slow up a little bit now, but generally there's a mock draft that I put out weekly, starting at the beginning of the season from either late August or September all the way through the Super Bowl, and then take a little bit of time. Then there'll be a few more drafts subsequently as we get closer to the draft, but not on a weekly basis. And I rock with my own podcast, not a visual one, but an audio one, with a couple of partners of mine on Easy Smoking the GM podcast. You'll also find me on Twitter, X, however you want to call it these days, Real Glynn Morgan at True Glynn Morgan. And so on and so forth. So yeah, or just, I tell people sometimes just go on YouTube, type in my name, make sure you spell it right. That's GLY Morgan, and invariably sometimes I'll pop up, and hopefully you like what you hear.
Hey, love it, man. And I've actually seen a couple of those mock drafts recently, and I saw you going both ways with it. That's one thing I love. I saw one where you were taking the Caleb Williams route, another one where you were trading down, going the Marvin Harrison route. And I want to get right into it.
Sure.
We're going to get into your thoughts on this Caleb Williams, the Caleb versus Justin debate. To me, the NFL's a bit of a copycat league. And to me, teams operate on a recency bias a lot. And Caleb Williams isn't your typical generational quarterback when they're throwing that term out. Usually those guys are 6'5". Usually those guys are athletic and big and have been that guy since high school or whatever. Those are the Trevor Lawrences and Andrew Lucks. When it comes to Caleb Williams, he's different. He's just a guy who teams want to compare to Patrick Mahomes because he has some of those traits. Teams are trying to find the next Patrick Mahomes, when, in my opinion, I don't think there's ever going to be another Patrick Mahomes. And using that recency bias in your scouting is not how I operate. I want your thoughts on Caleb Williams and this debate. Go ahead with whenever you're ready.
Sure. It's funny because I remember the first time I met you via social media or streaming like this, I was on Bears Country Podcast, BCP. Yep. And you popped in, we're talking. And this is before the season began, everybody. And we were talking. And I was like, and Caleb and the Bears wasn't necessarily something that was particularly considered per se. His name just kind of came up. And my first comment was like, not so much. We'll see, because we'll see what happens his second year at USC. And there were some things about his game that I had some issues with. Now, I wouldn't say major concerns, but just issues. I mean, no one's a perfect specimen, perfect piece. We're all a work in progress. And I remember your comment being like, whoa, like, dude, like most people aren't saying that. Like, why would you say that? Like, and you were kind of like, yeah, maybe you're seeing something I'm seeing too. And to answer your question, with Caleb, exceptional talent. I mean, you'd be ridiculous to think otherwise. If you just want to go, some people like going the statistical route. And, talking about a guy with 93 touchdowns, I think, in his career, less than 20, interceptions. I think maybe around 14 or so of his career, 20 plus touchdown runs. 10,000 yards in 2.5 seasons, or two and 2/3 seasons. I mean, we can go on and on. Heisman Trophy winner. We can go on and on. So to say that he's not talented would be ridiculous. Okay. Now, does that mean he's a perfect talent? And that's where the nuance of things begins. And it's like, well, what are you looking for? What does he do consistently? Can you see what he does translate to the NFL in today's game, where he is able to be as effective and maybe even more efficient at the pro level? And that's where I hesitate. And it's not to say that he cannot be eventually. The concern I have is, as you earlier alluded to, people calling him generational. Well, that automatically heaps a whole bunch of expectations on him. If that wasn't bad enough, then they say he's like Mahomes, which adds on a whole nother level of expectation that fans are going to have and where they expect him to be. And the question I always ask is, so what Mahomes are you saying he's like? The Mahomes now, or the Mahomes that came out of Texas Tech? Because there's a difference. If he's the Mahomes that came out of Texas Tech, now I have an issue if you're saying take him exclusively and expect him to become the Mahomes you know now, because now what are your variables? Those are completely different. And so it's for you to expect that he's going to gravitate towards the Mahomes in a more effective and efficient and quick manner, the Mahomes you know now, you're going to be sorely disappointed, unless, of course, he has a similar situation.
That's unfair expectations to put on the
Unfair.
dude. And I think that's where a lot of the fan base is crossed. It's not that Caleb Williams isn't a great prospect. And most of us, I think the biggest difference here with most fans is I think all fans would be happy eventually if we got Caleb Williams. There's a portion of our fan base right now that where if we stick with Justin Fields and don't get Caleb Williams, they're not going to be happy no matter what. Whereas
Exactly.
it's not that Caleb Williams isn't a good prospect. It just, I think it's unfair to call anybody the next Patrick Mahomes or say that any player is going to be a Hall of Fame type talent coming out of college. And when you put that on a quarterback specifically, I think it's even more unfair because when you go back through history, all first round picks, all the number one picks, it's hard to predict this kind of a rise at quarterback. There's been a ton of guys that we thought were going to be awesome, but it's usually someone who's not even the first quarterback taken in that draft. And it shows the just unsustainability of predicting quarterback success coming out of college. Even Mahomes wasn't thought of as the quarterback in his draft. It was Deshaun Watson or Mitch Trubisky. He was unanimously third or some even lower. Some people had Deshaun Kaiser above him. So it's just tough to put those kind of expectations on a kid. And to me, I don't think he's the best fit for Chicago, for this locker room, for the team we have right now that's ready to turn a corner and win. And Justin Fields is a guy who's proven he's a leader in this locker room. To me, I think in order to build that sustained long-term success, you want to trade down through the draft and get more picks.
I don't completely disagree with you. Where I would, and this is to be argumentatively fair or objectionably fair and not even so much devil's advocate, just saying, okay, what if how I'm seeing it isn't necessarily 100% correct? What if let me allow some latitude the other way. So when you mention in terms of him not being the right fit for Chicago or the locker room, initially, emotionally, and being a Chicagoan and watching it and where the Bears are now, initially I'm like, yeah, he isn't. But then I'm like, I don't know him, Caleb. I don't know how he quarterbacks. I don't know how he leads. I don't know if his devil may care attitude, as I see it, or more of a carefree attitude on the football field might actually be something that this team could gravitate towards. Maybe Justin's discipline might be a bit of rigidity there that doesn't allow him to play as free as we think he can and probably should. Caleb doesn't have that kind of compunction. Those things aren't something that's going to hold him back per se. He's more of a, you know what, I'm more creative. I would say between the two, and when it comes to passing, he's more creative in his passing acumen than Justin is. I'm not saying that Justin doesn't have any flexibility in it. Caleb is naturally more creative. I think that's something that's part of his game. That's part of his personality. And I think this is where you start to become when you're evaluating not just the skill set, not just the productivity, but how does this person play? Does this person play as they think? Do they think as they play? So that you have more of a seamless, more of an organic, I use that word a lot these days, but something that's more natural. And when it comes to that, I don't know how that's going to fit into this particular locker room. I think initially, no, because the locker room is such a Justin Fields locker room right now. And those guys like him and those guys rock with him a lot because they've gone through some of these adversity with him and they've seen how he's handled it. And they're starting to see how they're coming out of it as a collective. And it's not just the players. I would even say Eberflus, and I'll get back to that point a little bit later on. So when you insert somebody like Caleb into this situation, like with the Bears, let's just say the Bears take him straight up. It's going to be very difficult for the success to be as immediate as the fans would want, as the coaching staff would want, as a general manager would want, as people are expecting, because there is a transitional stage there. Personalities have to mesh. Everyone talks about the fact that quarterbacks, you don't want them having new coordinators. Well, he's going to have a new coordinator, so that's going to be an adjustment period too. So it's very difficult to gauge automatically, as you hear a lot of fans say, get him. He's going for it. He's the future. Get rid of Justin. Slow up. Pull back for a moment. It's not that easy. Let's take a moment to assess it. And for those individuals who hypothetically, for example, I was on a show and the gentleman gave me a hypothetical, and I understand the hypothetical, in terms of if you know for certain that Caleb is going to be that guy, without a doubt, without equivocation, do you take him?
Yes.
Yes, and I have my
But
reservations.
you can never know that, though. That's the biggest problem. I think that's the biggest thing that people are jumping to here when they say he's a generational talent. They seem to think has this for sure chance of being great in the NFL, which in my history, looking at quarterbacks in my life and all the guys who came out and thought, hey, this guy's going to be great, there's way more instances of guys not working out than there are of guys coming out and just walking into the NFL and being CJ Stroud. He broke records last year. That doesn't happen every year. People want to use that as an example, like, well, look at CJ Stroud. He just came in, they won, he broke records, they went to the playoffs. That was a very unique thing that happened. And even in that year, he wasn't the must draft quarterback. Bryce Young was number one on almost everyone's board. So
yeah, and the thing with the person's theoreticals or hypothetical, so to speak, I'm like, okay, you're giving me your positive hypothetical. There's another side to that. So what about the hypothetical where it doesn't work? So hypothetically speaking, everyone is positive. This is what's going to happen. If you do this, then you can just get free agents to fill in the void. What are you talking about? The Bears, the Bears have a second first round pick, and then you got a whole bunch of free agent money. You get, slow up. Hold on now. Free agents. Okay. Are there free agents for the positions that you need? First off, more times than not, when you acquire a free agent or free agents, you overpay for them. It's fine. That's nature of the beast, right? The other thing that no one talks about in their hypotheticals when they say, just get the free agents. Okay, well, you're assuming that said free agent or free agents that you're targeting want to come here.
People play Madden in their mind, and that's something that's bothered me on Twitter for years. People are always like, you could have gotten this guy. Or it's more than just money. A lot of these guys will go to schemes they're familiar with, coaches they've played for, cities that are closer to home, especially when you're veterans and you've already been paid once or twice. Those guys are a couple extra dollars isn't going to be a difference in moving their family across country to play in Chicago. And people forget about this and always think it's Madden. And well, you could have signed this guy because this team got him for that much, so you could have got him for that much. It's like, no, we would have had to offer him more than that, right? Because he took that money to go play with Patrick Mahomes, or he took that money to go play with the Super Bowl team. And we're not at that caliber yet either. So there's a lot more that goes into it that people don't think. And I love the context that you bring to the situation with that.
Or even more so, let me give you a great messed up scenario. When I say messed up in terms of messed up for the Bear fan, you're trying to draft a defensive, or you're trying to recruit or acquire a defensive free agent, someone that can really, that extra edge rusher we need. I'm not saying that person exists necessarily in this particularly free agency pool, but just as a for example, again, a hypothetical where it works against you. Mm-hmm. This guy, and you sell him on Chicago, you sell him on being a defensive player in Chicago, and the Chicago Bears put the most players in the Hall of Fame, and that most of those players are defensive players. And if you win here in Chicago, I mean, you're a king forever. And you look at players like Dan Hampton, who's made his living here, still living off the '85 Bears Hall of Fame, and Alex Brown, Lance Briggs, all these guys. You're an icon. They love you forever. And then after your career is over with, Chicago's a major media market, real estate, a whole bunch of different things you can, venture off into, and then the tangential aspects of how your life can be that much more enriched if you're here as a Bear, one of the original friend, all these things. And this guy is getting hyped. He's like, I can see it. I feel it. When I was a kid, I once even thought, man, if I could play like, Richard Dent, ooh, man, boy, if only. And he's pumped. The Raiders are also recruiting this guy. Okay. And they have a defensive head coach who's won a Super Bowl, and he's selling same stories and similar things. And here in Vegas, it's growing. It's a new, it's an older franchise, but it's a new beginning, this whole thing. And you're in Vegas, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, but I feel Chicago, something about us by Chicago. So he said, you know what? I just need to go ahead and talk at home with my wife. And you find out his wife is from the West Coast.
Mm.
And she's like, I don't want to live in Chicago. You've been playing for the Washington Commanders on the East Coast. I thought we had an opportunity to go back to the West Coast. And I also hear Chicago is not safe. And it's not just her saying it, it's her family and friends in her ear. And that's your wife. And then you have a whole bunch of other dynamics sifted in because, again, that's a reality in it. You do have interracial marriages, and you have to consider not just your culture, but your wife's culture and the culture you're raising your children in. I don't want to raise our children in a culture where there's gun violence. Now, if you live in Chicago, you understand these are blown out of proportion more so than not, but it's still a
From the
reality.
outside, a lot of people, those things are said, and those things, I have
Yes.
heard those things. I've heard I saw someone compare it recently on Twitter. Someone said Detroit is the way people think Chicago is, and I was like, that's kind of a valid. Not to take a shot at Detroit, but
yes. So that's a thing, and so that player may take same or less money to go to Vegas because XYZ. So my whole point in that long extended example is that there's no guarantee that free agent that you want is going to come here. And then where do you find yourself? As opposed to if you have control, and I use control, I hate that word in terms of controlling human beings, but in terms of being able to manage your economic situation better with the player and their them
having
being
them on the
rostered on your
roster
team.
long term,
Exactly.
yeah.
You're
That's how you
able.
can't. It's hard to plan without having that player control. It's hard to build your player's future, and unfortunately, the NFL is a business. But to go with your point there, on top of free agents and whether or not you can get them, people forget. Everyone wants to just throw in this resetting the quarterback contract, but they forget you have to pay other players too. Whoever else we would take in the first round, like if you take a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Rome Odunze, that means you're not spending money in free agency on a T. Higgins or a Michael Pittman Jr. If you draft a Jared Verse or a Chop Robinson, you're not paying for a Danielle Hunter, which I don't think we're going to do anyway, or a Chase Young in free agency. I think Poles wants to draft a defensive end, but people forget other positions make a lot of money too. Quarterbacks might make the most, but other positions, defensive end, wide receiver, offensive tackle, those guys get paid. And they keep getting paid more and more every year. So there's other dynamics into building a team, and people just want to reset this quarterback window are missing a lot there.
Here's the other thing. When you have a team, and I'm not saying the Bears are still a young team, but we have acquired some free agents who've already gone through 1 year on their contract. So maybe 3 years max before they got to start looking again. How are they going to feel about someone coming in where they may have to lose another year of winning games and achieving things, because now you're messing with my money. If you're DJ Moore, you saw the effect, and by you I mean the collective Bear fan, if you're paying attention, you saw the effect between when Justin was in the games throwing to DJ and when Bajan took over. And I'm not taking a knock on Bajan, but the chemistry wasn't quite the same, and DJ's numbers were precipitously down.
They were down, yeah.
That vastly different. Okay. And so now, DJ's like, well, hey, I already have a guy who I rock with in 1 year where he missed 4 games and I still got more yards than I ever got in one season. I had more receptions than I had one season, more touchdowns in one season. Just think if I had those 4 games, not to mention if I get another year and we're better synergized.
Or if you can get another weapon in here to take some attention off me as well,
right.
that would help even more.
And now you want me to step back another year and wait? I already told you guys I wouldn't mind getting another contract, and I maybe in 5 years I'm done. Okay, if you start adding it up, that gives you an opportunity to know, like, okay, we can start planning for another wide receiver. So my point is, other free agents or other veteran players, you're messing with my money potentially if we're not winning, and I'm looked at differently. Or the scheme changes on offense now because I have a different quarterback who does different things, whatever the case might be. So it is so much more nuanced than just our casual conversations. Is it Justin or is it Caleb? And like I said before, and I'll say it again, it's not so much that I'm against Caleb because of Caleb. It's not so much that I'm for Justin because of Justin. I'm looking at for the Chicago Bears. For the Chicago Bears, I want to have as many options and be as viable in those options as I possibly can. And this is a rare, and I'll just say, for the last half century that I've been watching stuff, I've never seen us. And the closest that's come to it was when the Bears had Jim Finks as a general manager. And that team he put together that led to the 85 Bears. And that basically, that franchise at that point in time just kind of rolled them till the wheels fell off in the early 90s. And they never, ever did anything to recoup for a long term. Yes, we have our periods. And if you look back at the Chicago Bears history, every 20 years, every 20, 25 years, we're good. They're dominant in the 40s, had a nice little spot in the early 60s. Obviously, I just alluded to the 85 Bears earlier, referenced them. You saw early 2000s, okay? And now here we are with an opportunity. We're due, and we're right in that sweet spot where we should be ascending. And now you're telling me this is the part where you want to step back and take a chance on a quarterback who you don't know. And then I start asking myself, what are we getting if we get Caleb Williams, which was the first question you asked a long time ago, which I'm just now getting to because it's such a nuanced process.
It is. And I mean, I think a point people miss there, and you led into it really well, is Matt Eberflus. Our head coach also matters there. He's a guy who's went through 2 years of building this team around Justin Fields and has now gotten to a point where I believe that Matt Eberflus as a head coach, he's ready to win and believes this team can win with Justin Fields. And then you have another dynamic there. What is something the Chicago Bears continuously do that none of us like and none of us as fans want to do? It's you draft a quarterback and then you fire the head coach the next season. And if we draft Caleb Williams, are we not set up on that exact similar path that we have not wanted to go down before? One of the points there with retaining Eberflus, I think that leads, you retained Eberflus, you brought in Shane Waldron, who's had success with a guy who, while not as talented as Justin Fields, Geno Smith was seen as a dual threat quarterback and was mostly written off throughout NFL circles, was a 31-year-old guy who had never had success. And in one season with Shane Waldron, he won comeback player of the year, threw for 8,000 yards in 2 seasons combined there, almost 4,000 yards a season. If he wouldn't have got hurt, he would have had it. But this leads me to believe Eberflus wants to continue on the path that they're going. And he doesn't want to take a step back and have to go through a rookie quarterback either. So I think that's another point people are missing in this conversation.
Well, I think some people don't care. And it's funny because they're like, get rid of Eberflus. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Okay. If there's anybody that's been more screwed than Justin in this whole process, it's been Coach Eberflus since the time he got here. And just think about it, for example. He gets here last, 2022 seasons, his first season as the head coach. And the general manager, I'm imagining the conversation, everybody. So I'm just in the imagined conversation based off of what actually, ended up the results of what we saw happen. Hey, Matt, this is Poles talking to you. Hey, Eberflus, listen, brother, this team is in shambles. I don't have much in the cupboard at all. I'm going to have to do some things here. So a blind person could have seen the fact that I probably have to get rid of Khalil Mack. Okay. So Khalil Mack's gone. He was like, okay, I understand. Yeah, that's fine. Wasn't able to get a lot in the draft because we didn't have a first round pick and the secondary was so bad. I saw an opportunity to get, to solidify a unit. So I got you 2 rookie defensive backs. Okay. Yeah, I can coach them up. No problem. Okay. All right. Season begins. Yeah. 7 games in, and it is apparent to me that Roquan, I'm going to have to make a move now or I can't make one at all. And Roquan's wanting money, and he's played really well. He's played well enough. This is a chance. He's hot. I can trade him now. So I'm trading the leader of the defense, but it's a linebacker. I understand. Yeah. And, while I'm at it, Quinn, too. I know he broke the record for, one of the oldest franchises in NFL history with sacks, but, I'm not going to get a lot, but maybe I can get something right now because the Eagles need something. And they taught me, Eberflus, like, I understand. Basically, what I'm telling you, Eberflus, this is going to be a season where you just kind of have to fall on the sword. You okay with that? I mean, we're going to start fresh next year. I got some plans. Yeah, I get it. It
was about culture. He told him, you got to preach culture. I want you, even though we're not going to have a great roster, I want you to show me you can get these guys to play hard. And if you can do that with these guys, I'm going to have some faith in you. And I think that bought Eberflus some time.
Well, I think Eberflus knew he was ingratiated to some degree because he was asked to sacrifice so much. He had to sacrifice. He's like, dude, I'm giving you absolutely nothing that you can use in your defense. Like everything you have here is not going to help you at all with your defense. We're going to work on that next year. And he's like, okay, sure. And so Jalen Carter has a season, and he's doing well, and he shows up and has a great play against LSU, in the SEC championship game, and he is your perfect specimen for your three technique. He is the guy that what the hell did he do in the off? Oh my God, red flags everywhere. Oh, can we get him? I don't know. It can't take him this high. We're, maybe if we trade down, but opportunity and the Panthers, and we get DJ. Okay, I understand. Yeah, yes, it's for the organization. Eberflus is an organization. And then the draft happens. The improbable happens. Carter falls to 9. Here we go. There's less pressure on him. No one's going to be mad at you. They'd be mad at you if you took him number 1 and it was horrible. 9? Oh, we get it. Hey, you even got an extra year. Figure it out. Yeah. Bring him in. It's okay. You trade? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Trade down. I get it. You got a 4th rounder for him for next, not even this year, next year. Okay. Whew. So we're taking a left tackle, right? No, right tackle. Taking a right tackle. Top 10 pick, and we're taking a right tackle because you see something special. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Oh, okay. And we know we didn't get anybody in free agency. No. Okay. Maybe. All right. Hey, it's okay, man. The draft happened. You got me 2 guys in the middle. I will coach them up. We're good. I know you didn't have enough room to get an edge rusher. I get it. You can only do so much. But you got me 2 corners, so I'm deep in the secondary unit. If I can just get some pressure up front, I don't need the sacks. I just need the pressure. I'm really good at doing that. I did that when I was in Indianapolis. Got 14 interceptions last year. Was only 85 pressures or less than 85 pressures. I'm pretty sure we can do great. And we start the season at, wait, what do you mean I don't have a DC? What do you mean HR fired him? What the heck? Oh, God. How am I going to be? Hey, relax. I got you, man. This is Poles telling you. I got you. Look, normally as a head coach, I want you focusing like 80% on the overall team and maybe 20% on the area that, got you hired. Let's just flip that. Focus 80% on the defense because that really needs your help. 20% on overall. Getsy did a pretty good job last year on offense. They'll help you out. Running back coach gets fired. Offense stinks. Nobody's healthy. You get no pressure, and Eberflus is like seeing his coaching career go out the window. And then what did we hear Poles say? He gets in Montez Sweat, and what did we hear Poles say? He backs him, and no one understands why. Why would you back him? Like, they're under 500. What has he shown? Because Poles knows what he's been asking Eberflus to do, what he's been asking to sacrifice. And he's like, you know what? The best way for this to work, change this defense around. Focus on this defense. That's what you do best.
Got to get him that pressure in the front 4. And Poles went out and did it.
And then you saw the defense, which last year, and when I say last year, I'm talking the end of the 2022 season. You saw a team that in most all statistical aspects that matter defensively, you saw these guys maybe be as high as 28, but most of them were between 30 and 32. They were dead last in a lot of them. It's close to dead last of them. And by the end of the 2023 season, what did we see? Number 1 against the defense, rushing defense overall, and basically a top 10 defense, top 3rd defense. Yeah, and all other statistical, all other defensive statistics that matter. And people are like, get rid of him. I'm like, do you realize what a minor miracle he just freaking did? A minor miracle. And he missed Justin for 4 games, right when Justin was starting to figure things out a little bit. He gets undercut by missing him and has to put in a rookie quarterback from where? Shepherd? I live in Chicago. The only Shepherd I heard of was Shepherd High School. I'm like, he's from Shepherd High School?
Oh.
So yeah, man.
And then the NFL also, things changed this offseason. We saw a lot of defensive coaches get hired. The top offensive play callers didn't land jobs, and we might have landed the best offensive coordinator out here. I feel like Eberflus deserves a round of applause for what he's done.
Yes, I think just for surviving, he and Justin both. And that's why, and I know life's not fair. I'm not saying that Justin should just get an opportunity to continue quarterbacking because he was dealt a bad blow. However, that is context. And there's a reason why his record is 10-28 or whatever it is. There's a reason why Eberflus has had a losing record as well. And I'm not saying that both of these guys, that they're martyrs or that they're, they're you have to give a small violin and everything. But I am saying, let's be realistic, people. I mean, really understand the whole situation before you so quickly dismiss someone and realize where you're seeing them being talented at. and understand that with a few things going in their direction, how much better off they could be. And you're building something. And this team and this locker room, the roster, the players, they've been through it. And so they get it. They understand there's a respect there. And sometimes, you stick with a coach right when you think you should get rid of them. And then you're rewarded by finding you have a Bill Belichick in your hands. And I'm not saying Eberflus is going to be Bill Belichick, but there are times in whatever the sport where a coach is right on the precipice of being let go. Bill Parcells is the same way with the Giants. This
Same
close.
with Dan Campbell in Detroit. He started out really bad.
This close. And don't turn it around just because in this microwave society you haven't gotten what you thought you deserve because you've been a long-suffering fan. Look, man, y'all don't know long-suffering fans. I grew up in the 70s where everybody sucked in Chicago. There weren't any good teams. Okay. So long-suffering is relative. But I do believe that if you look at in the greater context, the Bears are going in a direction, a trajectory that can be beneficial. And right now is opportunity to right a lot of those wrongs in terms of being able to have the roster, have the depth, have the physical flexibility and fluidity to do the things you need to do, and multiply your options around and invest in a quarterback. And you talked so earlier about quarterbacks and how they've not been invested. A lot of these quarterbacks, sometimes the better ones, find themselves being drafted in the mid rounds. Why are they better? Because the teams they find themselves on are already structurally sound.
When you have a better team to support the quarterback you draft, I mean, everyone wants to use the 49ers, but I mean, that's just the perfect example. But when you put talent around a quarterback, if you have a great offensive line, if you have weapons on offense, they're more likely to succeed. That's just true in the NFL. And having this number one pick, there's a chance to collect an abundance of picks here, or even grab more picks than you normally would seem possible for going back one pick or two pick. I think we can still get a pretty good bundle to go back a pick or two and still land a talent that I'm going to bring up now, Marvin Harrison Jr. Because this is nothing against Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams is a very good prospect. I have him in my top 5. I do not have him number 1. I do not think he's generational. I compare him a lot to Kyler Murray. I think he could be a really good quarterback in the NFL. I think he has elite arm talent. He's got some Kyler Murray with a better arm. That arm talent is elite. I just do not see Patrick Mahomes there. And people want to assume that Caleb is just going to be this Hall of Fame level type of player. And I just think it's so unfair. But I do think there is a player in this draft that if you want to put those kind of expectations on a player, I do believe there's a guy who, to me, is a safe pick. That guy's Marvin Harrison Jr. to me. He's one of the best players I've ever scouted. I want to know your thoughts on Marvin.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay. Yeah, I mean, really, bro. To me, there are two in this draft, and they happen to be on offense that I think they're outside of injury. I think these guys are fail safe.
Okay.
I really do. And it's him and it's Brock Bowers.
Okay.
Those guys are chess pieces. Wherever you put them, they're scheme, resistant to any kind of, that's to say it's resistant, but they're scheme friendly to anything. I don't care what your offense is.
They're dynamic weapons, and today's offense kind of trends that way. You need guys like that, and I agree with you there.
But as far as your earlier question about Marvin, if there's any player in this draft that is truly, both figuratively and literally generational, it's Marvin.
I've said it, man. I've said it, man. I agree.
Yeah.
Like,
when your dad's a Hall of Famer and you're taking all of his knowledge and you're bigger, stronger, faster than your dad with all of his knowledge, and you're playing against anybody at any level as you're matriculating through life and maturing, you are so much head and shoulders above everybody else. I mean, Marvin literally probably could have been he physically probably had the wherewithal and the mental acuity to play even as a rookie in the NFL. And I don't say that lightly. And I'm not saying he's going to dominate. I'm not saying he's going to be that dude, but he would be able to hold his own.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year was a big example. I think if he would have came out last year, if he would have been eligible as a sophomore, he would have been the first receiver taken and younger than anyone else and been a top 10 pick. And a lot of people, when CJ Stroud went to his pro day, a lot of people, they didn't realize this, but it was kind of a mini Marvin Harrison pro day. A
Yeah,
lot of the
well,
scouts, I talked to people and they're just like, that was who's that receiver? That guy, right? We want that guy. Like, we
right.
came down here to look at CJ Stroud, and yeah, he was amazing, but
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr. stood out just as much. And he's a guy who I just think he's a can't miss prospect. And I think
Mhm.
people just are overrating Caleb Williams and kind of underrating Marvin Harrison. I've heard a lot of people say, well, you can get, it is a very stacked wide receiver class. I will agree. I think there's 15, potentially 20 wide receivers in this class that I like, especially going down the Senior Bowl and seeing 12 of them down there that I liked. But
Sure.
just Marv is on a different level than
Yes.
all of those guys to me. And
Yes.
I think he's special.
Well, yeah, and I didn't even get into all his physical attributes because to me, athletes these days, there are some that athletically are different than others, but for the most part, a lot of these guys are there's a lot of equanimity amongst athletes. They're all extremely athletic. Hence the word athlete. But the thing that to me that separates them from one another, aside from the physical attributes, which I could again just said there's difference, but not the greater difference. The greater difference comes from how they approach their own process to the game, how they mentally approach getting better. How they handle things off the field, how they handle things on the field when adversity hits. How quickly they are to adapt, how quickly they are to be able to assimilate, even in that adaptability, be able to assimilate with what the offense is asking them to do and work with their teammates. Especially when you have a wide receiver quarterback kind of connection, you need to be symbiotic at times. How quickly can you get to that symbiosis? So someone like Marvin, he understands so much already. He's probably ahead of most quarterbacks coming into the league in terms of understanding the nuances of the game. And it's crazy. There's somebody else that'll come out next year. And I think a lot of times, I know I'm shifting right quick, but just in terms of making the point I'm trying to make is there's understanding the game, and then there's understanding it from those who played it, and then there's understanding from the greats that played it, and then there's understanding from the greats that play that are part of your family dynamic. That's where Marvin is on that latter tier. Shedeur Sanders coming out next year is on that tier. I think a lot of the flash and dash that surrounds him and his family, people get caught up in that and think that he's not a lot of substance. You go back and watch his games. I've yet to see somebody at the collegiate level reset his feet as quickly as he does and square his shoulders and deliver accurate passes, whether he's rolling left or right.
Now,
Now
that's a guy that's a magician from the pocket. I think people always want to talk, and not a lot of great quarterbacks coming out, but every other year there's going to be a guy like this. And Shedeur is a great example.
And he gets it in a lot of levels. Now he tries last year, and what happens is these guys who can do so much try to do so much. And that's what Caleb falls into. And Caleb has some of those some habits he's developed to become bad habits because he tries to do too much and he's tried to do too much. And he's leaned on himself so much. He's gotten used to that. It becomes habitual and it works against him, especially if a team can see that and leverage that against him. Sometimes our best quality is our blind spot. We don't see it because it's our best quality. And the point with Shedeur Sanders is here's a guy who obviously, his dad's Deion Sanders. It's the best cornerback that I've ever seen in my life in terms of cover corners go. Him and Rod Woodson and Charles Woodson and maybe a few others. But Deion is above some of those guys, okay? When you first heard,
he's the best I've ever seen.
Yeah. So. We talk about a guy who takes away the field. It started with him. I never heard that before Deion. Everyone else tries to get to that, but he really did it. But Deion imparted upon him all the things that he knows, his wisdom. But all the people that Deion knows. When Tom Brady, he's on your speed dial and you can talk to him about your footwork, you're at a different level, bro. Nobody else has that kind of access. And you can tell it when Shedeur plays. And getting back to Marvin, you can see it in Marvin's game when he plays. And he's so level-headed. I mean, his dad was super level-headed on the field.
His dad was a guy, Hall of Fame work ethic. He's the kind of guy who you need that kind of work ethic at the NFL. You need more than just talent at the NFL level to succeed. And Marvin's dad was a perfect example of that. And we have another guy, Brendan Rice, like his dad, Jerry Rice also. But Marvin has something different. So I know people will say, well, just because someone is, look at Michael Jordan's sons. He weren't great. But Marvin has all of the physical attributes of a Calvin Johnson Jr. Plus his dad was Marvin Harrison, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And I think That's something that people are missing there. It's more than just being the son of a Hall of Famer. It's
Mhm.
having all of that and then being an absolute freak athlete and probably the best wide receiver prospect I've ever seen. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, and you're right. Just because your dad or your uncle or your cousin is something doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to translate to you. But when you have the athleticism, when the physical traits are there and they're already at a Division I level or an elite level, so to speak, or approaching an elite level, what sets you apart is when you understand the game, and now you're just working. You're working with house money at that point. And so yes, it's going to be outside of injury. It's very hard to see that he literally is like a can't miss prospect. It's so hard. It's like you don't want to say because you don't want to jinx him, but it's like, dude, he might even be
Knock
jinx
on
proof.
wood.
Yeah, right. Not going.
So then, all right. So then, here's the question: what would you do with the number 1 pick this year in the ideal situation? Because I think all Bears fans, we just want what's best for the Bears. What's your best situation to do with that pick this year?
Yeah, with me, with the first pick overall, I mean, without a doubt, I'm going to take Cedric Van Pran because we need a center. That is my first pick. That's the biggest priority of the Chicago Bears.
Hey man, if you're taking the center, you got to take Jackson Powers.
No, I
Johnson.
know. That's why
I
I went past him. He was too obvious. That's why I went to
I
Cedric.
got you. You're
No.
like, wait, too many people might like that one. I got to throw one out there that they won't.
Yeah, man. Great question. And that's one that right now I'm still in the camp of getting more picks. I've heard other arguments recently, and it's not so much. And again, your question was what would I do, not what do I think the Bears are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So what would I do? I would feel confident enough that I have to ask myself, what is my reality? By my, I mean me and the Bears. What is our reality, right? Not what I would like to see happen, not what I want to see happen, not my dream scenario. What is my reality? My reality tells me, if I'm the Chicago Bears, I have several serious holes still to fill. I have a depth issue I need to fill. I have a financial situation that I can control for the next 4 to 6 years going forward if I make this trade and start tearing off these rookies that I'm acquiring, so that I know when their contract's up, but I can better gauge when it is. And if a situation arises where I'm unable to strike a deal with them and they want money that I'm not willing to part with, I can trade them and acquire some more talent because I have depth at that position, because I can double draft at that position, which we saw Poles do last year. Actually, we saw him do it his first year. Yep. His first year, he had 2 second-round picks. He got 2 defensive
DBs. Last year, 2 defensive tackles. This year, we're hoping
and don't
2
forget
wide receivers.
Don't forget, last year 2 DBs as well.
Oh yeah, 2 cornerbacks as well last year. Yeah, he's a double dipper. So
exactly. So what is that telling me? If he has a lot of picks, you can fortify yourself, because if one guy doesn't work, maybe the other guy does. If they both work, great. Then I have tradable assets.
And I think it's also there's a dynamic there of that I really love that a lot of people don't talk about, letting those guys learn together. Mm-hmm. They also help each other. I know Brisker and Gordon talked about that, and this year Zach Pickens and Gervon Dexter did the same thing. Like, this guy's better at this, but when he's working with this guy every day, he can also learn things from him. So I love that them coming up together, they help each other and challenge each other as well.
And you know what that suspiciously sounds like, Swifty? Culture.
Love it, man. I love it. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's what they're building in Chicago. And I think that's what Eberflus is underrated, as something that he's really brought to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. So what I would do is I'm planning for the future by taking charge of my present. And that's what I would do. And my reality tells me that there's no guarantee that one quarterback or 2 players in a draft, or 3 players, if I get 3 significant players, 2 players that I draft and maybe 1 free agent, or 4 players, that those 4 players are going to be the pivot that completely changes my organization, not just for now, but going forward. And if I hinge a lot of this upon 1 or 2 things, them either really being good and being where I think they need to be, and them staying healthy. Football is a sport of attrition. You can talk about at a quarterback position. You saw how Justin wasn't protected when he tries to run out.
Violent sport, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, and Justin is bigger than Caleb, and there's a lot more he's endured physically that I don't know that a lot of other quarterbacks necessarily would have been able to endure. And he still missed games due to that, but he's survived a lot of
Proven
hits.
his toughness, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, do I hinge all this on that? And I don't know how much of a gambler he maybe have a great poker face, but I don't know how much of a gambler that Poles really is. And that's kind of the duality there. You know, he has a great poker face, but I think he's very pragmatic. I think he gambles. He's a conservative gambler. He takes calculated risk, and he seems to be a very processed individual in terms of being, you know, very dogmatic in his approach, not sharing it with a lot of people, and then making his decision. Again, we talked about earlier how he could have taken Jalen Carter. It would have been okay to take him there. Everyone would have understood. He didn't. He traded down. It would have been okay to take a left tackle at that point. A lot of people weren't sold on Braxton. So take a left tackle. And you took a right tackle. You have to tune out a lot of people to make that choice, because I cannot recall a true right tackle who played right tackle in college being drafted in the top 10 to play right tackle in the NFL. I can't recall that.
No, he did play. He did play left tackle his sophomore year. So.
No. That don't count. He was projected as a right tackle, playing because he played right tackle.
Yeah,
and that's where he was drafted to play right tackle, as opposed to some guys. And I get there's a lot of guys moving around, but a guy like Paris Johnson started off on the right side, but he moved left. When you draft Paris Johnson, you expect him to be your left tackle. Now he might end up being your right tackle.
Where's he playing in Arizona though right now?
Right, he might end up being your right tackle, but you draft him to be your left tackle.
Even Penei Sewell, though, you see him, a guy who he was supposed to be one of the best left tackles we've ever seen. He's played right tackle almost every snap of his career.
Exactly, but you drafted.
I think that's a bit over. I think in today's, like back in the 80s and 90s, like the left tackle versus right tackle was a huge argument. But nowadays, teams don't just line up their best pass rusher at left tackle. They'll move their best they'll have their best if you have a left tackle that's good and a right tackle that's bad, they're going to have their best pass rusher on that right tackle every single snap. So I think both tackle spots are a bit more important nowadays. People overrate that a little bit. I think you need to have protection on both tackle spots. You can't, if you have a hole at either one, you're going to get exposed if you're going against Joey Bosa.
When it comes to this, though, and you're negotiating,
left tackle gets paid more. It does. Exactly. Hey, maybe that'll help us out with Darnell Wright in the future. Like, hey, you were a right tackle. You might have been one of the best right tackles, but you were still a right tackle. So we're going to save a little bit of money there. And Braxton, hey, man, you were a 5th round pick. If you develop into a top 10 guy, maybe you can save us a little bit of money too, because, hey, you might not have got this chance without us. So I think Poles is thinking long term there, but I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I would do. Now, if you ask me, what do I think the Bears are going to do? That's where I say, I don't know, because I've spoken to various people, or I should say, I've spoken to people who've spoken to other people, and based on some of those conversations and what they're relaying to me, a lot of people within the Bears, selecting process, I'll put it that way, a lot of people are favoring Caleb, and again, I get it.
I've heard it. I've heard it too. The thing is though that I think Poles plays it closer to his chest than anybody. So okay. I don't think what anybody's saying really matters too much.
Well, I think it matters. I don't know that will be the deciding factor that matters. Or those will be the things that he uses to be his deciding factors. That'll matter 100%. It'll be another part of the process, and there's always the financial concerns too. And although I may have different ways, and I think if you're a GM worth your salt, you find a way to make it work. I mean, the Los Angeles Rams, good Lord, they don't care about draft picks at all, and they seem to find ways to make it work. You can find a way to make it work. So I'm not so caught up on that. And again, that whole rookie restructuring, resetting the clock thing is the most goofiest. And I know it's bad English, but it's the goofiest, most ridiculous, argument or reason for something. I'm like, because that's worked so well for how many teams that keep trying to do it? Only one team has it shown to work where you're getting what you want, and that's the sustainability and your quarterback being able to, kind of cover up for some of the lack of talent here or there, and your team still winning. Because the Bengals came close, but Burrow can't stay healthy enough, and with him gone, that's my example that I'm trying to say. When that guy's not playing, where are you? And Browning's a nice backup, but he's not the guy, and they don't have enough other pieces in place in the depth. They have good talent, but they don't have the depth. So when those guys got banged up, then anybody step in, as opposed to you look at a team like Oh, I just had an example earlier. I apologize. I lost it. But
You're
there
okay.
are other teams
49ers,
where,
Dolphins, and Chiefs, those are teams that, a lot of talent on the offense where if they lose somebody, they can still keep
yeah.
it going. I think if the 49 honestly, I think the 49ers wouldn't skip a beat with Sam Darnold out there. I think they'd
No,
be
I
pretty
agree.
much just as good. Yeah.
I agree. And some of the passes, you might see some passes, you might have a deeper passing game.
Hmm.
You might see more strikes downfield with Darnold than you would with Purdy.
And that's not to take anything away from Purdy. He played his off last week again. The last game he played, a lot of those scrambles he made were big time plays that aren't normally part of his game. He's a good, smart quarterback, but that talent around him elevates him. Yep.
And
And
here's the
that's what
thing.
I
This,
want here in Chicago. If we get Marvin Harrison Jr. and extra draft picks, and who knows, you could even take Brock Bowers at 9 or Tali Fuaga, an offensive lineman. If you keep stacking the talent on this team, then it won't matter as much who the quarterback is. And if you can get more shots at quarterback in the future, if Fields doesn't work out and we have more first round picks going forward, that's
package.
the best way to build for me.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And again, we're talking about talent on offense. Let's not forget talent on the defensive side helps too, because that's what the 49ers have as well. You
Getting
know,
another edge rusher across from Montez Sweat would sure be sweet.
yep, no doubt. No doubt. So yeah, man, I think I'm that those are a lot of my reasons why. And I don't, and that's not to say that if you draft Caleb, you can't win and it can't work out. I'm not saying that. I just think you limit your chances, and you really need to be more spot on, because that ninth pick you use it unless you trade down from with that one. That ninth pick, that guy better hit too.
Yep.
You know. So yeah, man, it's not easy. It has its complexities. It's extremely nuanced. But this is what I do believe about polls. And I'll say this again. Just I've never met the man, so it's just from my vantage point as a fan and as a person who speculatively comes to conclusions and puts them on paper. Um, I believe he's his own person, unequivocally. And I think that's another big reason why you didn't see the Bears go out to get Harbaugh, because that would be a conflict. And I think Poles is very disciplined individual. I think he takes his time and he's not rushed into anything. I think he has an ability to understand the mistakes he's made and not make the same mistake twice. I think he learns not just from his own mistakes, but I think he learns from the successes of the people around him, be it those who are closely around him or just even if it's tangentially with his peers. I think he saw what Houston did last year and was like, wow, they really maximized. I didn't think about that. I'm not saying he said that, but just, I'm speculating on that. And here we are in a situation where I put one mock draft out to where the Bears were able to get Caleb and then get Marvin Harrison.
Oh, see, yeah. I mean, that's a whole different story right there. If you can get
I think
Caleb
it's
and
likely.
Marv, like,
Right.
hey, I don't think it's hugely likely, but he could see when you trade down. Imagine if when you trade down, you always acquire extra picks. And this is something, even if it's not Caleb and Marv, but if you trade down from pick number 1 and
Mm-hmm.
you acquire extra assets, that gives you more assets to then trade up if you want someone else, to where even if you get Marv with that first pick or another receiver like Romo Dunze or Malik Neighbors, if you trade down with your second pick, you have power to come up and get a guy you really want, in my opinion, like a JPJ, a center. I mean, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
you want, that flexibility to move around the board and get your guys. Because I don't think Poles is all about always trading down. Position he inherited here is what people don't understand. We had no picks. We had no
Nothing,
first
man.
round pick. He had
Nothing.
5 picks total going into that draft, and he turned it around and turned those 5 picks into 11. Now, most of them were 6th and 7th rounders because he didn't have the capital. But with
Mm-hmm.
one move at pick number 1, you can set yourself up for 2 to 3 years of flexibility. So I think that's what we need to do. That's what I would do. It comes down to whether or not a team offers you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not expected to get blown away by a deal to move down 1 or 2 picks, but you expect there to be so much interest in Caleb Williams and this number 1 pick that you can probably get more. If one of those teams at 2 or 3, the Patriots or Commanders, want Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams is their guy, you can get more than most people would think you're not going to get a player. We're not getting Jonathan Allen or Terry McLaurin to move down a pick. Those are crazy. But if we could get pick number 2, a second rounder this year, because the Commanders have 2 seconds, 2 thirds. We can just get 1 second and your first next year. Yeah. Give us our Montez Sweat pick back and give us a first round pick next year to go down 1 spot. That's a huge haul. And that's
a huge haul.
That's a win-win. They get their quarterback and they still got a ton of picks. They'd still have a ton of picks and it wouldn't even hurt them that much. So, I mean, there's a chance it could be a win-win here and we still get our guy.
Here's another thing I forgot to mention, and it's because it's so much when it comes, like I say, it's so nuanced when it comes to draft picks. There is more than one way to acquire picks, more than one way to stack your picks, and one or more way to adjudicate those picks. And what I failed to mention was, remember that scenario I gave where I said you're able to double pick, you're getting double picking positions twice over. And if one guy, you're unable to reach an agreement financially with them, if they go by the way of free agency, you have an opportunity to get a compensatory pick.
Yep.
And that starts in the 3rd round, from the 3rd round to the 6th round. Here's the other thing: the Bears having success. I believe Ian Cummings is still with the Bears.
He's decided he's staying for 1 more year. I think they announced that, but that's 2 more 3rd round picks coming. Yep.
Right, and not just for 1 year.
Yep.
2 years.
Yeah, we get one in. It would be 1 the year he leaves, and then 1 the year after. So yeah, 2 extra 3rd round picks on top of all the picks he's already accumulating. So yeah, that's how the 49ers are set up.
Exactly.
When Chase Young leaves in free agency, they're going to get a 3rd round pick back. So
before that, how they are set up now.
Yeah.
Robert Saleh left.
Yep.
They got I think last year was the last time they got a compensatory pick from him. DeMeco Ryans, they're going to get compensatory picks this year because of DeMeco Ryans. And then some of the free agent players are able to. So they're
getting one from Mike McGlinchey leaving last year as well. Exactly. I mean, they're set up that way. And that's what the Bears haven't been set. They've been a team historically that Jerry Angelo, Ryan Pace, whoever it was, they're overspending in free agency, which causes us to not get compensation picks. And then they're trading up in the draft and throwing picks away on old veterans. It's a completely different dynamic here. And that's why I love Ryan Poles. And that's why I'm so excited about this draft and so happy to talk with you about it, my man.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's an honor to talk to you, man. And anytime you want to come on and talk NFL draft, just hit me up.
Oh, most of them. Hey, dude. Again, thank you. I appreciate you. I respect everything you do, man. You, dude. I respect your hustle and your grind, dude. You're that guy. So, same here, bro. Same here. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.